it doesn't really matter what other people think or how they judge you, that what's important is the right thing for you and your family. And actually, I was quite prepared for the school to label me whatever kind of mum they wanted to.
Welcome to The Narratives of Suicide, the podcast where we bring hope, community, and a voice to those who've lost to suicide. It's where we dispel the myths of suicide. We dispel historical discourses and constructs that have been steeped in history for a very long time, and we're here with hope, love, and support for everyone out there who needs to listen to this podcast. I'm so sorry you're here, but I do hope it can give you something to use in your healing process, to be able to pick up the pieces of suicide and put them back together again in the best possible way that you can. Welcome to the Healing Narratives of Suicide today, as if on cue. We're here today with Andrea again. Welcome back, Andrea. Andrea spoke to us a little while ago about losing her very good friend, like a brother, basically, 8 years ago. And she's helpfully come back to talk about her son, Isaac, and his struggles with mental health. Because while we did the last podcast talking about losing Chris, it was obvious that this needed a story of itself for Andrea to share, because looking after somebody, a teenager particularly, with difficulties around mental health, has its own story. So we're back to talk about that today, when my dogs will join in when they can. Hi, Andrea. Welcome back.
Hi, Sue. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's great for you to give us this time again to share what it's been like for you, because basically, just a short recap, Andrea lost Chris 8 years ago and had to find her way of telling her two young boys. So they were 7 at the time. Twins, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Twins. So 2 boys who really looked up to Chris. They were like his uncle, weren't they? They really loved him. So you had to find your way to tell them. And this is what we'll share today, how that maybe, what that was like for you and how you got through that over the years and how that might have affected Isaac and how you've coped with that affecting you. So that's a short recap.
Yeah, that was well done.
You can always go back and listen to that if anybody wants to. It'll always be there. But today, this is about Isaac, really, and how you've helped him, who's now 19?
He's 16 now.
16. Where have I got 19? All these numbers. He's 16 now.
Yeah, so it's nearly 9 years since we lost Chris, and the boys were 7 at the time, so they're now 16.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so it's great that you're here to share this, because I know there's lots of mums in the world, dads, carers, who are looking after their teens and trying to help them the best way they can. So to hear your story will help them, I'm sure, undoubtedly.
Yeah, I'm really happy actually to have the chance to share, because I think we've just learned so much, and the blessed position of having my boys today doing pretty well. And so that means that I feel free to share. And Isaac particularly, who is my son who struggled the most, is becoming just a lovely young man who cares about people, and he wants me to do this. He not just said, yeah, okay, Mum, you can share it, but yeah, please do.
Nice.
Just yesterday he was telling me of a college mate who had lost his grandma and how he'd sent him a text and said he'd help him cover his work while he was missing, and it must feel hard, and he'd talk to him if he wanted to. So I'm beginning to see more than a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, but just see some good come out of what's been a really horrible, difficult journey for me as a mum and our whole family and my boys, really. And I can't find the right word to say. I was going to say in recovering from losing someone you love to suicide, but I don't know if recovering is the right word. Processing, dealing with, moving on, all those things.
There isn't the right word, is there?
Yeah. Do you want me to go back over initially trying to work out how to tell the boys?
Yeah, tell us that, because I think anyone listening to this might come into this freshly just wanting to understand that. How do you tell the children?
So, yeah, it was back in 2013. Our really good friend, Chris, he was part of our family, really. He lived with my parents and spent every Saturday night having tea with us and having a family strictly judging panel on the sofa and playing with my boys, messing up their playroom and clearing off before the tidying up and being like a brother. And my kids really loved him. He was great fun, but he suffered with his mental health and had been diagnosed bipolar. And he was really, really struggling, and we'd been supporting him. And yeah, it was one day in the March, he was due to stay with us, and I went to find him, and I discovered that he'd taken his own life by suicide. In the last podcast, I talked a lot about how that affected me, but the biggest thing in my mind as a mum was, how am I going to tell my boys this? I remember getting home that evening and just sitting down with my husband, and some kind of, I don't know, mode kicking in of, okay, the most important thing now is how we're going to share this news with Isaac and Ethan. They were in bed asleep, so we knew we had to do it the next morning, and it just felt too much for 7-year-olds to know. I couldn't think of the words to use or how we could say that Chris hadn't wanted to live. So we decided that we would tell them that he had died and answer their questions as they came up rather than offer them extra information, which just seemed the right thing to do, but we weren't sure it was the right thing. It was the best of all the bad things that we could say. So we sat down with them in the playroom and I said, boys, I've got some very sad news that I need to share with you. I said, when I went to meet Uncle Chris yesterday, when I got there, he'd stopped breathing and I tried to help and I called an ambulance, but it was too late. And I don't know that you don't imagine how your children will react when they hear news like that, but they just broke down, they sobbed. They then did ask other questions. Why couldn't you start him breathing again? It was just too late. By the time I'd got there, it stopped too long. Well, why did he stop breathing? So the boys had been aware that Chris had been really ill and we'd visited in hospital. He'd been in a couple of times with his mental health. And I said, well, you know that Uncle Chris had problems with his mind and his brain and his thinking, and those problems just got so big. That was why I can't exactly remember the words, but it just got left like that, really.
Yeah. Cushioning the facts almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost like it's the facts, but in a cushioning, lovely way of, it's almost keeping it simple, wasn't it? As much as you could.
Yeah.
Being aware that they might ask more, but keeping it as simple as possible for them at that point to process. Because that's itself enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
That he's died.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think the things we did. Chris's mum asked, the boys had made him a mug and a picture, and she asked if he could have those in his coffin.
Right.
Yeah, I think we tried to help the boys grieve as you would grieve losing anybody you lost. And I don't know that anyone prepares to knows how will you grieve someone that is part of your family that you love a lot who dies too young. It's not.
No, there's no guidebook, is there?
No.
In the moment, you're just feeling into your children, understanding them the best they can.
Yeah, and I think even now with a bit more time and after talking to you, I think that was the best we could do at the time. Even with everything that's happened, with hindsight, I probably, for my boys, would choose that same course of action again. I have wondered, should I have been more straightforward? Or not straightforward, just given them more detail, given them more information. Look, Chris had some element of choice in what had happened.
Right.
But even as I'm saying, how can a 7-year-old understand that when someone's got mental illness, that they've got a choice? I don't know. It hurts my head. It really does.
Yeah, so much, just so much, isn't it? What happened?
So I think anyone can only do what they do with the resource that they've got at the time. And so the boys seemed to do quite well for a little while, really. I think it was what I would anticipate, moments of real sadness, moments of remembering something. I guess having young children that meant that we could, I don't know if I'm going to explain this right, but almost have kind of rituals of memory, really, where this is what Chris did with us. We played this game with these marbles in this way. Let's remember Chris and do this. So I guess that was quite nice. Maybe if you have lost someone to suicide without children, that isn't so easily open to you. Whereas the boys took us to a place of actively sort of together making good memories and marking good memories with things. So that was nice. Yeah.
I think it's really important that we hold space for children to do that as well. Hold space for them to play it out, behave it out, the grief, like you say, putting things in remembrance for them or playing through their behaviour, because children will show their emotions through play and through behaviour as opposed to being able to vocabularize it. So
yeah,
give them the space they need to grieve in their way is just holding space for them, playing things out, behaving the way they are without tolerating absolutely everything, with clear boundaries as parents. But It sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it sounds like that's what you tried to do, just give them space.
Yeah.
But it helped you bring you to some reflection time.
Yeah. It also was so difficult though, because as the parent, I had encouraged Chris in his relationship with my boys, knowing how unwell he was, knowing that there was some risk. And so I had just an awful lot of guilt of this pain they're feeling is my fault because I could have protected them from it. We would have never cut Chris out, but I didn't have to allow him as much. I didn't have to let him as far into our family that meant the boys loved him so much, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can go round in circles forever going, oh, if only I'd done that bit slightly differently or this a bit differently. And I guess we just lived out our values, and you can't ever regret doing that.
Yeah, at the time, even though Chris was struggling and he'd attempted suicide, I think that's the key, isn't it? Even though he'd attempted it, you still lived out your values in having him in your life and in your children's life, and he was important to them, so you lived. But after Chris died, obviously the guilt then of the typical guilt of what could I have done differently?
Yeah.
To less impact on my boys, which was your mum at the end of the day, aren't you? First and foremost, a mum. So guilt came from that, didn't it? To see if they were unhappy.
Yeah, so I found it quite easy in some senses to forgive Chris for the impact of his suicide on me. But where I was angry was the impact of his suicide on my boys. And particularly because I'd sat with him after a previous attempt and said, Chris, you know, I can even love you. You just can't do this again. You just can't. But yeah, I think the more I talk, the more I think I've still got a lot of half-finished sentences in my head. Yeah. They're not finished off or rounded up.
Yeah, which we talked about earlier before we started recording, didn't we? How the processing never seems to be over, but it changes all the time. Sometimes it's more significant processing than others, and it sounds like you talking about this particularly is taking more processing as you're talking about it.
Yeah. It's working things out, and it must be so different for everybody because you bring to it your own other life experiences, and I come along with a drive for being perfect. I look at it and I didn't act perfectly as if anybody can, but I still somehow have that drive.
So true.
Yeah.
We bring our own personality, old traumas, old baggage, whatever words you want to use, in your construct of yourself before. You're still working on that whole perfectionism by the sounds of it. Yeah. Even in the moment, trying to be perfect with your words.
Yeah.
Well, let's give you permission not to be perfect with your words, because you're being very brave in sharing this anyway.
Yeah.
So it's perfect to be imperfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm learning. Yeah. I went on my own journey, I guess, in terms of how I responded and reacted in the aftermath of losing Chris. And for a while, it seemed like things were almost normal for the boys. And I knew we were going to be talking about this today. And I was trying to think what it was that caused Isaac to ask questions. And I can't pinpoint it or remember. And one of the things that has been incredibly difficult for us is that Chris took his life on comic relief on Red Nose Day. And so that is a really luminous marker of this is the day that Chris died for Isaac and Ethan. And so it may have been around that anniversary 2 years later, although I think it was a bit further on, because by this point Isaac was 9 and he just asked me. And I think he may have he's always been quite good with his words. He may have said, I've been thinking about Uncle Chris. It doesn't make sense how he died. What happened? And I was in that point where I had imagined really that would happen. And I had decided at that point I would just answer the question, and I can answer it in this podcast because that would just not be appropriate or helpful for people. But I explained what had happened so Isaac knew exactly. And we did have a long conversation about Chris being very unwell, that his intention in what he did was not to hurt anyone or to be mean or to be unkind, but that everything in his mind was just working so out of control that was the only thing he could see to do. Nice.
It's so important, I think, for children to recognise, A, it's not their fault. because children will think. Their ego works very strongly. What does this say about me? What's it about me? And B, that it wasn't their fault, Chris's fault.
Yeah.
It wasn't the loved one's fault. It was, whatever words you want to use, an illness. The way his brain worked, just to explain it just like you would if it was an illness, like if it was a physical illness that killed Chris. Just talk it in those frames, those words, whatever words they are for you, that work for you and your family.
Yeah.
Two really important factors. It's not your fault and it's not Chris's fault either.
Yeah.
Because that's what I think we need to do with suicide compared to other kind of illnesses. That's all, the comparison.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you did that. You kind of really said it in a very kind way. It wasn't Chris's intention to hurt anybody, but it was his way, wasn't it? It was Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hard. Such a hard conversation to have with a 9-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 25-year-old. I had to tell my brother and sister and my dad that my brother had killed himself. And I think that's one of the worst memories I have of all of it. Such a difficult experience to go through, because I can't even put it into words what that was like. So to tell anyone is difficult, more than difficult, let alone children. So
yeah.
But that's where you got to it when he was 9. He started asking and you gave the best answer you could. So he then was aware what was happening, what had happened.
Yeah. And we had a really difficult time for quite a while after that. I think it was, I don't know, it felt like the loss all over again. It felt like the beginning. It felt like, this is where I felt caught. I felt I should have told him, because now he's going through this again, for the reality of what it was. I remember, not the details, but I remember conversations about, this is why I didn't tell you when you were 7, because this is the choice Mum and Dad made, and why. We probably even apologised if he felt we should have told him sooner, but mums and dads can only do what they think is best. I shared with him some of the difficulty I'd been having, and I think we talked a lot about it being okay to cry, and it being okay to be angry or be confused. But I think it was just for a while, it was just a house full of emotion.
God.
But that, for Isaac, became really severe anxiety pretty quickly from finding that out. So he stopped sleeping. I would just sit on the floor next to his bed for hours. He was 9 and he'd be turning things over, asking questions. My evenings didn't exist because they were sat with him in his bedroom. We downloaded audio books, everything we could think of to try and help him. And I haven't talked about the specifics of this with him, although we've had lots of conversations recently. But his anxieties were very much around, I didn't know, I didn't understand. Chris was always happy when I saw him. How do I not know? How can I be sure that you won't die tonight?
Sure, yeah.
So just the world seemed to become very unsafe to him.
Yeah, of course.
And that presented as well as him just not wanting to not be with me. So in hindsight, I probably would do the same kind of things. And we had really supportive teachers in school, but I would get him to school and his teacher would have to hold on to him for me to leave. There was one occasion where I was halfway home and he was running up the street with his teacher in hot pursuit, which I've talked to him about recently, and he's able to laugh and smile at it.
God, good.
But it was so distressing. That continued for about 2 years. He got a fantastic year 6 teacher and it was beginning to improve by the end of year 6. But so there was a point not that long after he'd understood that Chris had died by suicide that he got so anxious and worked up about a particular lesson and test that he had coming up that he tried a kind of a 9-year-old's copycat version of what Chris had done. And that happened in front of his brother. I think that probably is my worst moment in all of this.
Gosh, yeah.
Just, I can't find any words to describe the absolute horror of that situation and confusion of knowing what to do or how to get help. Or we went straight, I kind of rang the GP surgery in an absolute flat panic, and they said bring him down. but I just felt like they had nothing to offer.
Oh.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make him safe. What I was hearing was, it's hard because I'm not quite sure about my memories, but what I felt I was being told is, this isn't a real risk. This is just saying I'm distressed. And I think all the professionals who told me that, and I still think that, were wrong. Even in hindsight, I think it was a real risk. And I think our situation might have been very different if he wasn't only 9.
But at the time, you're in panic because you've just experienced it, and that your mum mode kicks into fight or flight, and you go asking for help, and you will listen to the professionals to some degree because you have got no idea what to do in those circumstances. There is no guidebook for being a mum anyway, let alone if your son attempts anything remotely like Chris did. It's just so hard to know what to do in that moment. So you go to the professionals, say, well, take him home, he'll be fine. Keep an eye on him, bring him back in next week. We'll refer him to CAMS or the local authority to get some support. Ultimately, you are then walking back in the house with a child, not even a teenager, a 9, 10, 11-year-old, with responsibility for knowing deep down somewhere maybe that there was more to it than you were hearing. So there's such a conflict then and such a lot of responsibility, isn't there, to being on watch. And other people have described this. I'm on watch 24/7.
Yeah, I was just panicked, and I was going between my emotion, which was saying, just stay home, both of you stay home, sit in, watch DVDs, watch videos, don't do anything. You don't go to work, he doesn't go to school, and that. And then I've got some part of me somewhere saying, no, that's not right. You have to live your life and you need to help him. But how do I tell school? What do I say to school? I don't want anybody to know this. I want everyone to know this. And I think we just held it really close and really tight, and hardly anybody knew.
Sure.
And I didn't know where to get help. I think we were referred to CAMS.
CAMS is in the UK, by the way. It's a child and adolescent mental health service, part of the NHS.
And I found out the waiting list was something like, even as an urgent referral, the waiting list was going to be about 7 months. And I'm like, I'm going absolutely nuts. I think I must have had some very irate conversations on the phone with people in private behind closed doors, shouting down the phone, how ridiculous is this? This is, I know you've got a lot of people waiting, but you can't have that many kids who've had this extreme response, that it's okay to wait this long.
Panic, and actually a panic, just not knowing what to do.
Yeah, we did eventually begin, and a bit sooner. I think I wrote a number of fairly firmly worded emails and letters. And we were given some strategies that really helped. And the one that really helped for Isaac, he's a mad football fan, was he had a poster on his door of a football player. They didn't just tell us to do it like this. They told us to do it with a poster on his door and coloured labels that would let me know, so he could communicate how he felt and what his risk was, without having to come and tell me, speak to me. So they were suggesting green was, I'm all right. And orange for, I'm not doing so well, I might need some help. And red, things are really bad. When I think about it, though, when I think what I did, because this all came from me, it just felt, I don't want a poster about mental health on his bedroom door. That's just, I don't know. That was just my reaction in me. So I went and I bought him his favourite football player poster and had it printed up on a firmer material. And then I made 3 footballs of the different colours, a green one, an orange one and a red one.
Nice.
And then he could switch the football colour.
Did he play along with it? Because some kids...
Yeah, he did it. He did it. We used it for a long time. That really worked for him.
Because some kids would be like, I ain't doing that, or they'd say they would, and then might not do it. So I'm glad he did.
Yeah.
It gave you a bit of reassurance, then you could look at the colour and step back and relax a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the vast majority of the time, for about 2 years, there was an orange football.
Oh, shit.
And it wasn't green very often. Oh. And to be fair, by the point we'd got to there, the red hardly appeared at all. Because I think we were already sort of 12 months down the line from the initial severe difficulties. So, yeah.
It's a real waiting game, isn't it? It's just feels like a waiting game. It feels like waiting for some help from somewhere that doesn't come. But in the meantime, trying to do the best you can with all the other commitments around him. Like, do I go back to work? I guess you did carry on working, and he did go back to school. And
yeah, so I was part-time, and I get life just has a way of happening, doesn't it? So he was doing remarkably well. We'd worked with high school over transition. We'd gone in and spoken to them, and we'd set up contingent so that it continued to be really quite difficult until about 6 months into year 7. And then everything seemed to settle down and we were doing a whole lot better. And that's when my dad, his granddad, got a terminal cancer diagnosis. So we kind of went through more challenges, or Isaac went through more challenges with his mental health. But I think by that point, I had come to a place of being much more open myself and asking for help, being prepared to say what we needed rather than to fit in with systems that are a bit under-resourced and broken. And
right.
So I guess sort of an example I can give is the school were pushing, because Isaac's a bright lad, for him to do a baccalaureate and take all the subjects that fit. And I, in a polite way, but in a way of I'm not moving, I just said, no, he won't be doing that.
Right.
That's not going to help his well-being.
Right.
His well-being is more important than lots of grades at GCSE. And
so you started to get more assertive, more spoke for him more. So you lost that conflict between, the early conflict of I want to shout about it, but I want to hide from it. I want to tell no one, but I want to tell everyone. That conflict you had, you started to actually be his voice, didn't you?
Yeah. Things started, I think, gradually. I started to just realise that I suppose it's the perfectionism that it doesn't really matter what other people think or how they judge you, that what's important is the right thing for you and your family. And actually, I was quite prepared for the school to label me whatever kind of mum they wanted to. That they could do that. I would just act for the best interests of Isaac. But actually, it was about that time then I found a really great supportive online community.
Great.
A Facebook group called Parenting Mental Health. And their whole ethos is partnering your child and understanding what they as a young person need. You don't have to demand and inflict societal norms, or you can do what's right to help your own child thrive and do well, and also look after yourself as a parent.
That's on Facebook, is it?
Yeah, there's a Facebook. It's a registered charity
group. So I'll put the link in the comment section, but
that would be great. It's been so helpful to me, so helpful to be seen and understood. It is a safe place.
Amongst other parents, guardians who are struggling.
Whose children have, any kind of mental health struggle. So many young people are having increased challenges with their mental health throughout the pandemic. And
so you could drop your perfectionist belief about yourself, because in there, everyone's going through the same thing. So in there, you can be safe and enough to share what it was like that morning. The amount of shame that can come from and our own stuff that can come into that. I know when my son struggled to go to school, I used to feel terrible ringing the school to say he's not coming in today. That phone call you have to do in the morning. What do I say? Do I lie again and say he's got a cold? No, it's time the truth came out. Okay, so he's refused to get up this morning. He can't get up this morning. I changed that quickly. Instead of refused, because I don't like the whole he's refused.
Yeah.
I evolved over time to start to say, he's struggling to get up today, he won't be in, he just needs to take today, and maybe tomorrow, and maybe the next day.
Yeah.
That brought up so much of my schooling, and I was such a good girl at school. I tried to be a good girl at school. That was my own upbringing of, I'm saying good girl almost jokingly, because it was the construct that I lived in and I had to live by. And for me to ring school and say I wasn't going in, my son wasn't going in, felt like it was me.
Yeah.
Being the naughty girl, basically, to put it simply.
Yeah.
So I struggled a lot with that and had to learn over time to change my vocabulary around it and my attitude around it, again, to sort of evolve into more of a spokesperson for him, partnering with him rather than adding to the shame. And the amount of meetings I had with school where I had to walk in and be the one that spoke for him because he wouldn't go to do the discussions. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that idea of partnering brilliant.
I think it's so important just around compassionate use of language. It almost sounds as though a child who's struggling with them, or a young person struggling with mental health, being naughty, refusing. It's just not. And you wouldn't treat any other health condition like we treat mental health.
Yeah. And school refusal is the biggest thing for us, I think, with children with mental health difficulties, to deconstruct for people, to help schools deconstruct it. It's not school refusal.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation once where you wouldn't treat somebody with a physical illness in the way that you're treating me and my family and my son, by just saying, well, he has to just get on with it, so don't treat him the same way. It's discriminatory in my eyes.
Yeah.
But I had to find a voice for that over a long time.
It's probably going off slightly on a tangent, but I was reading an article about parents who are suing the university where their daughter really sadly died by suicide because of, associated with that was severe anxiety around oral examinations, tests. And reading that only yesterday was quite triggering for me, because I thought, we've got another stage to go on where there's going to be more stresses. But the university are currently trying to argue that they didn't owe their child a duty of care for the mental health. And I just, if it was physical access, if it was no appropriate ramps, you can't get your wheelchair in, it's clear cut. But supporting children and young people who have mental health difficulties is just so important.
They're putting those things in place, because that girl might have found it easier to do it in private or from home on a Zoom call, or there's just provisions you can put in place like you would if it wasn't a ramp. You just need to...
It's just those reasonable adjustments, and it's helping institutions understand that it's reasonable to make adjustments for people who have mental health difficulties.
Yes, hell yes. There you go. You've said it in one. Make reasonable adjustments, as simple as that. It's not simple, because there's lots of and there's a big system around it. But you've just given a really good, clear example of why that's necessary with that story, and with Isaac, that he needs that now going forward, and you're the spokesperson for that for him. But again, that brings such a lot of responsibility. That's hard to do. What my story was trying to say, it's not easy to change our vocabulary and our narrative and our words to one more compassion in that partnership. So the group that you had helped you to do that, didn't it? Gave you support while you did that.
Absolutely, yeah. What I would like to say is that the college that Isaac and Ethan are both going to now are fantastic.
Great.
They've put things in place but stood back. It's only recently with mocks that Isaac's had to engage any of that support, but not to a high level. But they were there and they offered it, and actually it has been relatively easy for them.
Right.
They just listened and they responded, and I'm very grateful for that. And
so it can be done. It can be done.
Yeah, and I just want to see any parents who are struggling to be able to just ditch the shame and just say, this is our situation, will you help please? We're not asking a lot. It's a small help for a really big impact.
With our own personalities involved as well, which I'm hearing a lot of today. Your personality of being a perfectionist, my personality of being a good girl, all impacted our ability to do that, to be able to speak from a safe place and ask for what they needed, and the support of other people to back you up, like the group. Might not be a real backup, they might not step in for you, but they're just there in the background, holding space for you.
Yes.
It's all such helpful things to notice what part of your personality making it difficult, and what support you can get to make it easier for yourself with compassion. It's not a short-term thing. It sounds like you're still there. You're very pleased with how he is at the moment, and never goes, does it? That worry, maybe, is the word.
Yeah, I want to hope that it will. But don't set me off talking about therapy, or I might not stop. But I've got a whole ton of long line strategies that I can use for myself.
Yeah, when it does show up, when anything does show up.
Yeah.
And I've heard that with anybody, and every mother and father, and there'll always be that in the background. Where are they? Are they okay? Mental health difficulties or not? But I think there's certainly an extra level on it when you've been in the position you've been in with Isaac. And I'm drawn to the whole personality side of it as well, because Ethan seems to have handled Chris's death differently. Yeah,
and I think that must come down to personality, especially having them as twins. I think you can say that they've been raised pretty similarly. No, it's not that it hasn't had impacts for Ethan, but from very early on, there were different personalities. And Isaac was the baby that crawled after me into the bathroom. And Isaac was the little boy who watched Fireman Sam and had nightmares about fires. And so I guess there are different propensities to different emotions or feelings. And
I think that really helps to identify as well if you're struggling, because it helped me to recognise I've got 4 children, and to recognise that I was responsible for my mothering of them, but I wasn't responsible for their journey in life and their personalities. Yes, I gave birth to them. Yes, they ancestrally got my DNA, but which makes it hard to kind of say that actually they're on their journey. All 4 of my children are on their own journeys.
Yes.
And I'm here to support and scaffold that differently at different times of their life. But for me to take 100% responsibility for them, actually, it's probably because, like you say, when Isaac was young, there was parts of him that would have the nightmares and Ethan didn't. So their personality, who they are, their journey is there. And our scaffolding might need to be different for all of them because they're also responsible for their own lives.
Yeah. You remind me of the founder of Parenting Mental Health, a lady called Suzanne Alderson, has written a book. And in the book, one of the examples she used that really sticks with me is that we're gardeners, not carpenters, and that we're not creating our children into something we've imagined and shaping it, but that we're giving the environment around them what it needs so they can thrive and grow the best. And different plants are going to need different scaffolding. I'm thinking, some plants you put up like a wicker structure around it to lean on it, but others you just feed the ground with something different, there isn't one perfect way to support children or your children, or there's just actually what environment are we in now and how are they doing and what can I put in that supports it?
We're gardeners, not carpenters. I've heard as well, it changes from when they're young to really caring for their physical needs, and then it turns into their emotional needs as they get older and care. And we almost become managers as they become teenagers as opposed to the physical. And it's a hard shift for us to make, I think. Some of us to make. But there's a great book called Get Out of My Life, but Can You Take Me to Alex's First? And it's the typical teenager. Get out of my life, Mum. I don't need you anymore. I'm fine. Oh, but actually, can you just make an appointment with me at the dentist? And they're in that conflict all the time of wanting to separate from us, but also needing us. So we're the managers then to being the right gardener at the right time, as opposed to the carpenter trying to shape them or making them into the people we want them to be, because their personalities won't let us anyway. They are their own. Anyway, I think that's come from my own fortune as well. I've just seen how different they all are, but how similar in other ways. And how much like my brothers, their uncles, how all that DNA comes through the lines of the family, that I can't control all of that. That's not in my control. So he's doing...
I think having my 2 at the same time, that when I've reflected on that, brings me some level of, freedom from thinking, that's my fault, because it's like, well, actually, I've done exactly the same here at the same time, and I've got 2 different results. So who am I to think that I had any degree of influence over which response was?
Yeah, but that just speaks to that gardener analogy. Some need different plants and some need different gardening skills than others, that's all. And that's our part in the whole responsibility. We're the gardeners. We're responsible for that. And that might mean, like for Isaac, you've had to speak more for him and stand up for him, or speak for him like I've had to with my son. And find your own support while you're doing that.
I'm quite a pictorial thinker, and I imagine actually, I'm the gardener, but I've been gardening on crutches.
Oh, gosh.
It's kind of like, actually, it's quite hard to do that when you're impaired to a degree yourself with your own stuff.
Especially when you're in grief yourself.
Yeah.
You're impaired just with your own personality, like my good girl and your perfectionism to some degree, but they also are helpful sometimes. It's good to be a perfectionist. Sometimes it's good to be a good girl sometimes. But we want to keep them in check. But you've also got the grief aspect that you're just trying to cope with, and all the trauma that came from that. Hence, in your last podcast, you talked about EMDR and CBT and all the things you've done to try and process and help yourself. And I guess those have helped you as well with Isaac and how to manage.
So one of the things that has become more helpful to me recently is actually one of the things that the psychologist did with Isaac. We actually had a period where we had family therapy. which is an experience in itself. So you sit in a room with the whole family and a therapist guiding the session, and then behind a two-way mirror, I think we had 3 other people kind of watching and taking notes. And I really did not want to go, but I would have tried anything if it might have helped Isaac. And it was a very beneficial experience for us, actually. But one of the things, Isaac couldn't talk. The therapist, he had a case, and then he was collecting these little toys. They were quite cheap toys. They were called zomlings. They were like little rubber monsters. Mm-hmm. And she asked him, what would the zomlings say? Nice. And he found his voice through these toys. And in a way, that's what I've done, is I found my voice through my pet, through Rafi. So at points where I couldn't say anything positive to myself because it felt a lie, somehow that positivity was in there because Rafi could say it to me. So I could imagine my dog saying, you're doing well, you're doing okay, but I couldn't say that for myself. So yeah, but that was kind of came from seeing the services, the psychologist work with Isaac and realising, okay, she's helped him tapping into his own feelings and how to deal with them. And
yeah, it's like a metaphoric distancing with it, because it's able to speak through the monsters and you through your dog compassionately towards yourself. But to do it directly was just a bit too much at the moment. So there's a bit of distancing there to do it through another metaphor.
I don't really understand how it all works, but it does work. So yeah. I can safely say I have many conversations with my dog and he's very helpful. I'm not coming across as a complete nutcase. So
you're still on the journey. Isaac's doing well at the moment. I'm so pleased. But you're aware that there's still, like yesterday when you read that article of the other girl at uni, I guess it brings up things for you, to activate you a little bit, to maybe worry a little bit more. And then you process that hopefully through Rafiki, the dog, who compassionately says to yourself, it's okay, you'll be all right, you can cope with it. You've coped so far, you'll cope again.
Yeah.
All those kind of lovely words that help you just process that emotion at the time that it gets activated. Is that what you do? Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty close to it, yeah.
Yeah, we have to remember to activate the dog, don't we? After we feel the activation, bring in the dog, bring in the metaphor, bring in the monster, bring in whatever it is that will say to us, you'll be all right. That friend, that compassionate friend, which is your last podcast was about how you did that. Thank you so much for sharing your story again, but this time very much with Isaac. And I'm so pleased you've been able to do it, and hope any parent out there, not just mothers, but any parent with a child. And I think it's so important to recognise, isn't it? Even if you're listening to this and you've got children and someone's just suicided and you're not sure what to say, it's okay to, again, they're their own children. You are you, and you will do the best you can with that.
Yeah.
It's not always going to turn out the way it did with Isaac, like it didn't with Ethan.
Yeah.
Everyone's different and everybody's personality is different, and you don't know how it's going to affect the children, but you giving them space and giving yourself space and your self-support during the whole process is all you can do with what you have at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything you want to say before we finish?
Thank you for talking to me. I think it helps me to process it even further, and just the same message, be kind to yourself if you're listening and you've got struggles, or you've got children particularly with struggles. Be kind to yourself. I don't know if I can do this. Can I plug Parenting Mental Health? It's a brilliant organisation. So if you have a child or a young person who is struggling with their mental health, you'll find so much compassion and support and space at Parenting Mental Health. You will find with a Facebook search.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us here today. I hope it served you and given you something for your journey with suicide. Come back and subscribe, like, do whatever you need to do on your platform to help us to raise awareness of suicide, because the more we keep saying the word, the more we can gain support for us left behind, and the more we can raise awareness of the word and how society sees it, and reduce this stigma that's so attached to it. Please get in touch. You can find me on my website, suicidegriefsupport.com. I really want to hear from you. But for now, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And remember, we are stronger together.